For over 3 decades, Soul Train was more than just a TV show. It was music, dance, style, and pride all brought together in one place. Every week, people tuned in not just to watch, but to feel something special. It had energy, rhythm, and a sense of identity that many shows at the time did not offer. It gave people joy. It gave them confidence. It gave them a reason to celebrate who they were. But then, without any warning, it was gone. There was no big farewell, no emotional final episode, no last celebration to honor its legacy. It simply disappeared, leaving behind silence and confusion. And inside that silence, there was a story about one moment, one scene, that many believe changed everything forever. People still ask the same question today. What really happened that day? Why did such a powerful show end so suddenly? And why was there never a clear explanation? To understand the truth, we have to go back to the beginning, long before that final moment ever happened. Soul Train started as a dream. It was a bold idea created by a man who wanted to change what people saw on television. At a time when black culture was often ignored or shown in a limited way, this show did something different. It gave black artists a real stage. It gave dancers a chance to express themselves freely. It allowed audiences to see something real, something honest, something that reflected their lives. It wasn't just about entertainment. It was about identity and pride. Week after week, the show grew into something much bigger than anyone expected. It became a movement. It became a place where legends performed and new stars were born. The famous Soul Train line became one of the most recognizable parts of the show. 2 lines of dancers would form, and one by one, people would step forward and show their best moves. It was fun, but it was also powerful. It gave people confidence. It allowed them to express themselves in ways they couldn't anywhere else. At the center of it all was Don Cornelius. He was not loud or flashy, but he didn't need to be. His calm voice and strong presence gave the show its unique feeling. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he made sure every part of the show followed his vision. From the music to the clothes to the behavior on stage, everything had to match his standards. For years, that vision worked perfectly. The show became a cultural icon, and its influence spread across the country. But as time passed, the world began to change. Music changed. Culture changed. A new generation started to rise, and they brought new ideas with them. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, hip-hop had taken over the music scene. It was bold, raw, and very different from the smooth and polished style that Soul Train was known for. It spoke about real life in a direct and sometimes harsh way. It connected with young people who wanted something more honest and less controlled. Don Cornelius was not comfortable with this change. He believed in keeping the show positive, clean, and respectful. He worried that some of the new music promoted ideas that did not fit the image he had built over the years. While the rest of the world was moving forward and embracing this new sound, Soul Train held back. And slowly, that decision began to hurt the show. Younger audiences started to lose interest. They wanted something new, something real, something that reflected their everyday experiences. Other shows stepped in and gave them exactly that. Meanwhile, Soul Train began to feel outdated. The excitement that once made it special started to fade. Ratings dropped, and even when new hosts were brought in, they could not bring back the same magic that Don Cornelius had created. Behind the scenes, things were also becoming difficult. Production costs were rising, and it was becoming harder to keep the show running at the same level. Staff members were leaving, and the direction of the show was becoming unclear. Don Cornelius, who had once been deeply involved in every detail, had stepped away from his daily role. Without his strong leadership, the show started to drift. It was no longer the same. Then came the moment that would change everything. It was supposed to be just another taping, another episode like so many before it. No one expected anything unusual. But from the very beginning, something felt wrong. The schedule was disorganized, the crew seemed confused, and there were delays that created tension on set. People who were there later said the atmosphere felt different, almost uncomfortable. It was as if something was about to go wrong. The biggest issue came with the guest performance. The artist was part of a new generation, bold and popular, but very different from what the show had traditionally featured. There were already disagreements before the performance even began. There were arguments about the music, the choreography, and the overall presentation. It was clear that not everyone agreed on what should happen. When the performance finally started, it became obvious that this was not a typical Soul Train moment. The choreography was more intense, the visuals were more provocative, and the tone was louder and more aggressive. It pushed boundaries that the show had always avoided. Some people in the studio were excited by this new energy. They saw it as fresh and modern, but others felt uncomfortable. It didn't feel like Soul Train anymore. And among those who were not happy was Don Cornelius. Even though he was no longer running the show full-time, he was there that day, watching everything closely. What he saw did not match the vision he had spent decades building. Reports suggest that he was deeply upset. To him, this performance was not just different. It was a sign that the show had lost its identity. What happened next is where the story becomes unclear. Some people say he demanded that the recording be stopped immediately. Others claim there were heated arguments behind the scenes. Voices were raised and emotions ran high. Decisions were made quickly, but not everyone agreed with them. What is certain is that something serious happened that day. The episode was never aired. It disappeared without any explanation. There was no official statement, no clear reason given to the public. It was as if that moment had been erased. After that day, everything began to fall apart very quickly. One of the show's major distribution partners decided to pull out. Without their support, it became almost impossible for Soul Train to continue broadcasting on a national level. Local stations began dropping the show one by one. Within weeks, the program that had once been a cultural giant was no longer on air. There was no announcement, no farewell, no closure. Fans were confused. People who worked on the show were confused. Even some of the hosts did not fully understand what was happening. It felt like everything ended too suddenly, like a story that stopped in the middle, without a proper ending. While that final scene became the center of attention, it was not the only reason the show ended. The truth is more complicated. Soul Train had already been struggling for years. The audience had started to move on, the leadership had weakened, and the show had lost its connection with the new generation. That controversial moment was simply the final push that made everything collapse. Still, the mystery around that episode continued to grow. People began to ask questions. What exactly happened during that performance? Why was it never shown? Does the footage still exist somewhere? Some believe the episode was too controversial to air. Others think it revealed how far the show had drifted from its original purpose. A few even believe it was hidden to protect the legacy of something that once meant so much. No one knows for sure. And that uncertainty has kept the story alive. After the show ended, the silence that followed was powerful. Don Cornelius himself rarely spoke about it. When he did, his words were short and careful. He once said, "I think it went far enough." For a man who had built such a strong and lasting platform, his quiet exit felt unusual. It left many people wondering what he truly felt inside. In the years that followed, his life became more complicated. He faced legal troubles, personal struggles, and health issues that slowly took a toll on him. Friends noticed that he had changed. He seemed more distant, more tired, and not the same person they once knew. Years earlier, he had undergone serious brain surgery, and the effects of that stayed with him for the rest of his life. He dealt with pain that never fully went away. Over time, that pain became heavier, not just physically, but emotionally as well. He had also lost control of the show he had created. It had changed, moved on, and was no longer in his hands. For someone who had built it from nothing, that loss was deeply personal. It was like watching a part of his life slowly fade away. Then, in 2012, the world received shocking news. Don Cornelius had passed away. The man who had brought joy, rhythm, and pride to millions was gone. Tributes came from everywhere. Artists, dancers, and fans all shared their memories and honored his legacy. He was remembered as a pioneer, a man who changed television and gave a voice to a culture that needed to be seen.